Good morning, friends. Thank you for being here. Shabbat HaGadol, this great Shabbat, was so called for a number of reasons, one of which, maybe the most beautiful reason, is the one alluded to in the Haftarah, that the prophet Malachi looks ahead to a great and awesome day of the Lord. But at other times, this was the Shabbat on which the rabbi gave a sermon, a formal sermon, one of only 2 times in the entire year. One at the high holidays, and this one before Passover, to remind everyone of the intricate laws for preparation of the home for the Passover and the particular rituals that were involved in getting ready for that great celebration. Well, that's no longer the role of the rabbi, because over time formal sermons became the regular. And so the traditional Shabbat HaGadol sermon was really a couple hours long. I promise we won't do that today. If you'd like to actually know my favorite teaching for preparing for Passover, I can sum it up in a thumbnail. I went many, many years ago to a little talk by a very Orthodox rabbi in Los Angeles. And the attendees at the program were so concerned with the minutia of preparing for Passover. And he kept saying, ladies, because it was all women, when it comes to chametz, don't eat it, don't own it, don't benefit from it. That's it. And many, many more questions came, and intricacies and questions about dish towels and pockets and garden sheds. And ladies, when it comes to chametz, the leavened bread, don't eat it, don't own it, don't benefit from it. And he kept saying that over and over again in such an effect that I can hear and see that so clearly to this day. So that's really what you need to know. For 8 days, don't eat chametz, don't own it, which is a wonderful thing to do. You can, quote, sell your chametz to a very righteous person who is not a Jew and thus not subject to the laws of Passover, who will, quote, own all of your donuts and extra chametz that you couldn't get rid of or eat or properly give away. She will own your chametz for 8 days. So it's a wonderful thing to do. You authorize the synagogue with a tiny donation, and we will transfer ownership of your chametz for 8 days. You don't have to kill yourselves, please, to prepare for Pesach. It's supposed to be a celebration of liberation from slavery, not a run back into it. Okay, that's all you need. Don't eat it, don't own it, don't benefit from it. That's it. Okay. Shabbat Shalom. In the town of Sepphoris, the voice of a street peddler was heard, crying out, "Who wishes to buy the elixir of life?" Well, the great Rabbi Shana was sitting in his academy studying when he heard the peddler's voice, and he was most intrigued. What could the elixir of life be that is being sold in the marketplace? "Come here, my friend, show me what it is that you have to sell," he said. The peddler approached him and drew out a book of Psalms. He showed the rabbi Psalm 34, verse 13, and the passage right after, which says, "Who is the man that desires life? He is the one who keeps his tongue from evil. He departs from evil and does good. Seek peace and pursue it." Now, this midrash is actually in Vayikra Rabbah, a commentary on the laws of our parsha today. What does keeping one's tongue from evil have to do with the intricate laws regarding bodily emissions and plagues on houses and garments and furniture have to do with one another? The laws of the Metzora have long been the basis for numerous rabbinic homilies against the spread not of a visible plague with noticeable symptoms that could be scrubbed or washed by running a load of laundry and keeping away from folks for a little while. In fact, Metzora has long been associated with the spread of evil speech. lashon hara, evil speech or gossip. For thousands of years, the rabbis have conjectured that mitzora, or tzara'at, sounds absolutely similar, with just a little bend of the ear, to motzi ra, the bringing forth of evil, and most specifically with the mouth. They saw in it cause and effect. If one is guilty of lashon hara, of evil speech, one will be afflicted by a kind of plague and thus becomes a metzora. If that's the case, then that's a plague that is still pretty widespread. According to the sages, it was the divine that afflicted those who had engaged in evil speech. And the sacrifice to begin the healing from tzara'at and to atone for lashon hara looked like this, and we just heard it. In Leviticus 14, verse 4, the one who was attempting to be ultimately purged of tzara'at, once they were actually physically cleaned, was to bring 2 live clean birds, a cedar stick, a strip of crimson wool, and a hyssop. Now, Rashi, the 11th century biblical commentator, breaks down the significance of each of those elements that seem so odd and easy to pass over, so to speak, in our Torah. He drew from the Midrash and the Gemara and explained that the birds are sacrificed because they constantly twitter and chirp. Now, I love birds, and I'm sure you all do too, but when they come to be a metaphor, twittering and chirping, isn't twitter a great word? Creating sounds like the chatter of lashon hara. Cedar stick is used because cedar trees stand tall, symbolizing a kind of haughtiness and ego. There's a time to stand tall and a time where it just becomes prideful. And when one experiences or indulges in haughtiness and ego, that can fuel our judgmental and hurtful speech, let us be honest. The piece of crimson wool, Rashi says, looks like a tongue, which is the physical God-given tool through which we speak. It can be the greatest thing in the world and the worst. So sometimes our speech is for good and far too often for bad. And the unassuming little hyssop plant represents the need for humility in the elimination of haughtiness. A wonderful way to read the sacrifices that were brought. They can seem so random, but with a little poetic license and some wonderful imagination, we can see some beautiful messages in what the Torah suggested we should bring in order to help us to get past our tendency to evil speech. This Shabbat Hagadol, this Shabbat that is called Great, I have had the privilege this week to read about a true Gedolah, a true great person who has just left our physical world. And I have been learning from her what it can mean to use one's life for good and one's words, not to harm, though that might have been tempting, but to teach and to heal. And the truth is, we need look no further than members of our own community, may they live to 120, who walked through the fires of hell of the Shoah and still went on to live beautiful, kind, amazing, fulfilled lives, always using their words for good. But this week, the Jewish people and the human species lost a Gedolah, a great woman. Gerda Weissmann Klein died last Sunday, April 3rd, in Phoenix, Arizona. She was 97. Her book, All But My Life, was written in 1957 and has been continuously in print since then. It was among the earliest Holocaust memoirs. Her riveting survivor testimony is shown as the final statement of the memorable film that concludes the permanent exhibition of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. She was born May 8th, 1924 in Bielsko-Biała, a southern Poland city near the Czech border with a significant ethnic German population. She was multilingual. And shortly after she turned 15, the Germans annexed Bielsko and made it part of the Reich. Her family temporarily moved into the basement of their spacious home. Her brother Arthur was deported in 1941. His fate was never known. In June 1942, the Jews of Bielsko were deported and Gerda was separated from her parents, whom she never saw again. For 3 years, she was in a series of labor camps, toiling in the freezing cold of the Polish winters, the blazing heat of the summers, little to eat, no medical care, sleeping on straw, beaten constantly at work. She contemplated suicide, but remembered the admonition of her father, who told her suicide was a final solution to a temporary problem. Words she was to recall again and again as she spoke to high school student audiences throughout the country, comforting students after tragedies such as Columbine and the endless school shootings that we've experienced since then. Gerda was on the death march in the Czech countryside in the final days of the war. It ended in Volary, and I discovered last night that she was partnered on that march with our friend Rabbi Chaim Beliak's mother, with whom she stayed close, inseparable friends, living near one another in Phoenix for the rest of their lives. That was extraordinary to learn last night. Gerda survived, while her closest friends, her companions in that long ordeal, mostly did not. And she pondered a question that haunts many survivors. Why did I survive when others did not? I am no better than they. She never answered that question directly, but the quality of her life, the causes she championed, the testimony that she gave again and again with her words, her grace and compassion were the answer. She endowed her survival with healing purpose, with healing words. Her experience of liberation, if you don't know Gerda's story, there's so much more to it, but just some moments. Her experience of liberation is among the most moving testimonies that we have, and I learned much of this from an article by my teacher, Dr. Michael Berenbaum, who was my teacher at Academy for Jewish Religion. Been at a number of places. The American Jewish University. Michael Berenbaum is considered one of the world's foremost Holocaust scholars. You may be familiar with his work. And he shared some of these pieces. He relayed their story. It's gettable on YouTube and in so many other places. When Gerda was liberated, she saw a jeep appearing on the horizon, not with a swastika, but with a white star, an American star. And a young American soldier appeared. She spoke to him. She said, "We are Jewish, you know." He hesitated for what seemed a very long time and then said, "So am I." That soldier's name was Kurt Klein, a German-born American Jewish refugee who enlisted in the U.S. Army, one of many refugees who went back to fight an enemy that they knew. He too has been featured in many documentaries, and he asked Gerda, "May I see the other ladies?" Gerda recalled it was a form of address we had not heard in years, to be called ladies. Gerda continued, "As he opened the door for me and asked me to precede him, I followed him. And that soldier who opened the door is now my husband. He opened the door to my heart, the door to my future." At that point, Gerda weighed 68 pounds and hadn't had a bath in years. But theirs was a storybook romance, a true partnership, only ended in this life by Kurt's death in 2002. Gerda Weissmann Klein wrote 10 books, including some wonderful books of fiction for younger readers, and she was one of the first survivors to tell her story to the American Jewish community. For years, she was a most sought-after speaker for the United Jewish Appeal, working tirelessly on behalf of Jewish causes, most especially its women's groups, where she had a considerable following for generations. She was speaking about the Shoah in the 40s and 50s, well before such things were in vogue, and when many Jews, including survivors, were advising silence, suggesting that we forget the past and build the future. In later years, Gerda spoke all over the world, to princes, presidents, and kings, to audiences of prominent and prosperous members of influential global communities. She reached out, telling her story to heal, to help, to give hope and promise. In 1995, her biography was made into a 38-minute film, One Survivor Remembers, by Carrie Antholis and HBO, and Michael Berenbaum was one of the co-producers on the project. It won an Emmy, an Academy Award for Best Short Documentary, and the Cable Ace Awards. And given the events of the Oscars of the last couple weeks, I'd rather think about Gerda's speech at the Oscars, which is widely regarded as one of the most memorable ever at the Academy Awards, given not by a Hollywood star, but by a Holocaust survivor. And this is what Gerda said at the Oscars in 1995. I have been in a place for 6 incredible years where winning meant a crust of bread and to live another day. Since the blessed day of my liberation, I have asked the question, why am I here? I am no better. But in my mind's eye, I see those years and days and those who never lived to see the magic of a boring evening at home. On their behalf, I wish to thank you for honoring their memory, and you cannot do it in any better way than when you return to your homes tonight to realize that each of you who know the joy of freedom are the winners. And for that, she earned a much-deserved standing ovation. Gerda was named to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Council by President Clinton and was awarded the President's Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor, by President Barack Obama. Her citation read in part, Gerda Weissmann Klein's life is a testimony to the tenacity of the human spirit. By sharing her stories and encouraging others to see themselves in one another, Gerda Klein has helped to advance understanding among all people. Friends, may our Passover cleaning be so much more than on the surface. May we have a cleansing of the soul and of the tongue, so that our words, our deeds, and our lives bring our world even one little step closer to the redemption and healing envisioned by the prophet. May our words bring about a turning of the hearts of children to their parents and of parents to their children. Who is the person that desires to live a long life? The one who guards his and her tongue from evil and lips from deceitful speech. Let us turn away from evil and speak good. Let us seek peace and pursue it. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Pesach Sameach.